New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Again, dear ones, Reverend Robert with you over here.
Rev Z right here.
And this is New Thought today for Tuesday, April 9th, 2024. So grateful you're with us. Please do feel free to chat along, chime along, drop a comment, let your friends and family know what we're doing, and or leave enjoying the conversation, basically. Feel free to join the conversation. So how you doing today, Z?
Yes. Doing well, man. Spring is in the air again over here, and I'm loving it. Brightens up the attitude, brightens up the perspective, brightens up the vision. It's just a wonderful thing. After all that eclipse activity we had yesterday, life, it's a wonderful thing that shows you that life goes on.
Yes, exactly. I saw a meme this morning. It said, why is the rapture only scheduled when there's an eclipse in North America? Anytime there's an eclipse anywhere else around the planet, we don't hear diddly about the rapture. But when it's over North America, it means we're having a rapture. So, but you and I, we're both still here, and that's a good thing, in my opinion. So, if there was a rapture and I didn't hear about it, hey, folks, let us know. But
yes.
It's always interesting to see what New Thoughters, people that profess to believe in the New Thought philosophy, create around things like this, and who pays attention and who doesn't. And I was talking to one of our show hosts, and she basically said, I said, and she lives in the path of totality. And I said, you doing anything on Monday? No, I really don't. Yeah. So for some, it's a great, big, huge event. And for others, I sat here in my office. I was working. I didn't even notice if it got dusky or not outside. So didn't even notice.
Yeah, I went out. We had like 60%. So I went out and had my glasses and I looked and yada yada, and it was cool. It looked like somebody took a bite out of a cookie. But the interesting piece that in a New Thought perspective for me was this, that the science, imagine how people felt or what people thought 1,000 years ago when this happened, right?
Yes.
They probably did think the world was coming to an end, or the gods were mad, or whatever, right? But now we understand that it's God's laws that are in operation, right? And it holds true to the idea that they're universal principles. That was a universal principle that if you were in the path of that, everybody. I mean, the eclipse was happening everywhere over the place where it was, but depending on your location, it was 100% or 60% or 20%.
Right.
And so from a New Thought perspective, when we talk about, we deal with universal laws and principles, this was a prime example of what that means and how it's implemented, how the principles are implemented throughout the globe.
Right. Exactly. And I love that it points to, in another way, how far we have come. Because yes, at one point the upper understanding, if you will, of human consciousness, of universal principles and universal laws, was very, very limited. And here we are centuries later. Humanity has evolved. There's no question about it. Humanity has evolved to a
Yes.
greater understanding and a greater consciousness of these events, that now it's not so much the gods have come to kill us as it is like, hey, woohoo, we got an occasion to party. Let's let's blow off work and blow off school and go have a good time when these things happen. Because I just saw, it's interesting, the day after something like this, I've seen ads all morning to send your glasses in so they can send them to kids in South America that are going to experience an eclipse later this year, I think, even, right? And I just saw an article that was outlining where all the full solar eclipses will be for the next 70 years, because it's mathematically precise. It might be off by a half a degree or by a minute or a little, things will change over the next 70 years. But for the most part, you can plan your vacations on them for the next 70 years if you wanted to.
Right.
But
Yeah. And so, for me, when I think about New Thought today, right, and in the future, what kind of guideline, if you will, or what kind of activity do we need to engage in to be anticipatory of things happening, right? We know that eclipses are going to be happening across the world. We can prepare. When we look at our society today and the things that we're dealing with in the political realm, health and wellness, technology, AI, how do we begin to take this universal principle container and, looking at the future, begin to say, here's what we do. We need you got to have these glasses, right? You got to put on these glasses to see the world in a new way and be able to not go blind.
Right. Yes. Great. It's a great question. And I think that's something that philosophers such as ourselves and others, and this is a philosophy after all, New Thought philosophy, we look at, there's kind of the both and. So let's take, we're talking about eclipses. Let's jump off on the sun for a little bit, because I don't remember the name of it, but it was a science fiction movie that I watched so many years ago, and it was predicting how a wobble in the sun drew Earth closer to the sun, and so the sun could burn much more quickly, and the elderly people and the wisdom keepers of the culture needed to stay out of the sun completely, because it was that dangerous if you didn't have young skin and you weren't protected and you weren't wearing, and it wasn't so much pushing sunscreen as it was pushing a natural approach to avoiding the sun. That, and that, to me, it was sort of this, cautionary tale. But so much of what American, at least, culture does is we get into that doomsday idea. We get into the apocalyptic outcome. We get into, the death and the destruction of it all. And I don't know, I guess I want to see more. I'd love to see some more science fiction that didn't end with the Cylons or the Borg or the bad guys winning, taking over.
Yes, yes. Because I'm thinking here about, you know, how do we begin to move as Reverend Robert Schuller would say, possibility thinking. Right now, a lot of people are problem thinking, right? When they see something, they see a problem. They don't see possibilities. And what New Thought is about is possibility thinking. Change your thinking, change your mind. So that means I have to have a reimagining of things. I have to re-articulate things. I have to see them from a different vantage point so that I can look at a different possibility.
Yeah.
Because I would submit that most of us who've come to any situation with the ideal of I'm dealing with the problem, or the idea that I'm trying to find out a possibility to move beyond a certain thing, you got different outcomes, and your energy and mindset and everything was totally different.
Yeah.
And the results as well.
Yeah, the results as well.
Yeah. And that's it.
Excuse me. So we've got, and I agree with you, right? Absolutely. We got to look at the possibilities. When we as New Thoughters are, and it seems so simple. It seems like, well, this should be a no-brainer. We got to look on the bright side of life. We've got to take that, whatever it is that we see, whatever it is that's coming into our experience, and say, wait a minute. Not just what's the good that could come out of this, but what's the good I want to come out of this? What is it I want to see? What is it I want to birth onto the planet? What is that? And I'm going to use my favorite word, vision. What is that big vision beyond what I can individually know, what can only truly be known through the collective, and say, that is what I want. And that is where I will keep my attention. And that is where I will keep my focus, and not let ourselves, and I think this is one of the biggest keys to it, is not let ourselves get sucked into and wrapped up into the everything is broken story. There's a guy I follow on you. There's a guy I follow right now on YouTube, and I don't want to use his name because I'm kind of getting tired of his channel, because he falls into the trap. And he's reporting, he's like this independent street journalist from New York City. And he's reporting on what's happening with the migrant crisis in New York City. And he's reporting on what's happening with the housing crisis in New York City. And he's reporting on what's happening with the transportation crisis in New York City and the subway crisis that's in New York City. And if all I did was watch this guy, you would think New York City is falling apart. Now, maybe it is. I also noticed that, you know, he loves to hold up his cell phone and show you what the news is saying, and then tell you exactly what what you just watched the news telling you. So his videos are 15, 20 minutes long, and it's like, well, you got a 5-minute story here, but you tried to you're making this into 20 minutes. So I don't know that I'm here anymore. I check out of a lot of his videos early because of it. But it is my point in all this is he has a very specific perspective. And so he goes looking for that, to fulfill that perspective. Like every video starts with, it has begun, or so it begins. It begins. New York's doing this. It begins doing it. And it's like, he is his own best self-fulfilling prophecy. And we understand this, I believe, intellectually in the New Thought movement, but how many are out there actually like, let's go take our cell phone and film the good news happening in Denver every single day and be like, no, that ain't, I don't care. It don't matter that there's a quote crisis, that this is going on or that's going on. Let's keep our eye on the prize.
Well, here's the thing that you said that clicked immediate. Crisis sells, right? And so you get, we've gotten addicted, I believe, to crisis, to drama, to excitement of a certain type, right? And so if I don't start my talk off with something that's, in that vernacular, people are going to turn off, right? Because what it does, I believe, I'm reading The Four Pivots by Dr. Sean Ginwright, and it's that idea of lens to mirror. In that kind of a modality, I can just put the lens on somebody else and I don't have to look in the mirror at myself.
Right. Yes.
Because now if I do that, now there's some accountability that I need to take. There's some transformation of my thinking. That, there's a whole lot of stuff I got to do now, as opposed to just point that lens at you and say, look, I messed up, or look how much trauma or drama or whatever the situation is. And what we need to begin to do if we're going to implement a new thought is say, yes, we understand that these things are present in life. It's the eclipse is a perfect example. Yes, we understand that eclipses are going to happen. We also understand that if you look at that, you're going to burn your eyes out. So we've come up with a way to look at it and not burn your eyes out. You put these glasses on. Now, you can not put the glasses on, being defiant or whatever, and burn your eyes out. Or you can put the glasses on and see the sun and get the full experience of it and keep moving.
Right. And we don't have to let those things control our lives. So the conditions don't have to control our lives. Yeah, there's an eclipse. I didn't have to, I can choose to let it influence how I live my life, but it doesn't control me. It doesn't control how I show up on that yesterday, whether I took the day off from work or didn't, whether I went to school or didn't, whether I hid behind the shed or didn't, whether I looked at the sun without glasses on or not. We don't have to let the occurrences, the events, the conditions of our lives control how we show up and what we're doing in the world. So again, if we can come back to that place of hyper positivity, perhaps. And then people call us Pollyanna. I guess.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think Robert Schuller had it. He just says he wasn't Pollyannish or anything. He just said, look, I am a possibility thinker. That's my way of looking at life. I look at life from the standpoint of possibilities. And when I do, he would sometimes say, miracles happen. And oftentimes he would say something to the effect that the miracles are always there. You just aren't looking for them.
Right.
Your possibility of things happening in a certain way are not presenting themselves because you're only looking at it from the problem. The same thing that Einstein said, you can't solve the problem from the mindset, from the point of view, from the idea that created it. You have to have a possibility thinking, a new way of looking at it. And that's what that's what this philosophy, that's what this teaching is about. Not that it doesn't rain. Yes, it rains, so I get an umbrella, or I put on a raincoat, or I wait till it stops raining, then I go outside, right? I come up with possibilities of how to get the thing done, as to looking at it as a problem, as an excuse.
Yep. And in the old days, when I grew up as a kid, we had rain barrels.
Yeah.
Yes, folks, I am that old.
Recycle that rain, right?
You harvested that rain. You collected that rain. You had rain barrels, and you pulled that rain off, and you kept that to drink out of. Sometimes it was the cleanest water around. It was stuff coming out of the sky, and your rain barrel would fill up, and people would have their own little irrigation system off their rain barrels, water their gardens and things like that. Now, I know that still happens, but it's not the prevalent perspective. Right? The folks back when I was growing up, man, we got off on a tangent.
They charge you for it now. I mean, some of
yeah,
no, but sometimes it's all on point. Some cases they charge you now for that, right? And so again, it's about what this show is. New Thought Today. Think about that. There was a time someone had an idea to catch rain and use it for a rainy day, if you will. No pun intended. But now there are a lot of counties that if you it's illegal to catch rain to use.
Right.
Because they assume it belongs to the city or the municipality, and you can't do it. And if you get caught, you're in trouble.
All right, so let's really go there then.
So think about that. Think about here's a universal thing. Huh?
Well, so I have been, and we talk about it here on this program a lot. We're living on the spiral. We're living on a spiral that is always evolving and always expanding. And part of what the spiral does is it revisits earlier periods of consciousness, earlier paradigms of life, if you will, but from a higher perspective, a higher consciousness, a different perspective, or a more... it's hard to explain this one without sounding elitist. A more enlightened perspective, many would say. And yet, it feels like we've done the turn around the spiral that was the industrialization, which is the ultimate control, which is municipalities saying you can't harvest water. There's a community here in Colorado where the HOA is very clear that you can't grow vegetables in your backyard. Now, it happens to do with the fact that it's built on a former toxic waste or nuclear waste site, and it's built on top of land that might still be irradiated. They don't really tell us that in the HOA, but it is in that community. It is in their rules and regulations that you're not allowed to grow. You're not allowed to have vegetables. You can grow flowers all you want, but you can't grow vegetables. And so my point here is, I think the spiral is coming back around where things are going to have to go back to a bit more of the communal style of living, of the small town style of living, of places where you do collect your rainwater. Okay, maybe you got to filter it now. And when I was a kid, you could just drink it out of the bucket. Maybe you got to filter it now. But where we're come back to a more collaborative, cooperative, co-creative type of society. And we're halfway through with our show, and we're finally getting around to our main topic that we discussed today, folks, and that is taking a look at the future of society through a new thought lens. And to me, it seems like we're the natural ebb and flow of life in the world and everything is going to necessitate a more, again, communal, cooperative, collaborative, co-creative style of society.
You mean it's going to have to follow nature? There's going to have to be some understanding of diversity and inclusion and belonging and that whole value and all those things that are needed to create a whole society, a whole place of or as we would say, a whole ecosystem or a whole environment. That's amazing. And as you talk about the spiral, in Indian tradition, in Hindu tradition, they talk about the yugas, the Kali Yuga, and all that, which speaks to the spiral dynamics, right? It speaks to you go through these cycles, and then you get to the Kali Yuga, which creates rebirth, right? And you start, so it's basically you going back to the cycle again, but at a different level, at a different vantage point, and hopefully a lot smarter and a lot more in tuned to what's inherent in all things. And so this whole idea of going back to smaller, interconnected, belonging units, it begins to operate like a body, right? One unit that says, y'all could be the healthiest everything, but if there's no heart pumping blood, y'all are toast.
Yep. And you just said the key word, I think, of the coming decade. Belonging. Mm-hmm. I think we're really at that point where I think in many ways a lot of people have lost sight of a sense of belonging. There's a lot of hanging out. I'm thinking in the political terms now, in the political realm. There's a lot of people that are hanging out with other people, but they don't really know that they belong, or they don't really know where they belong, or they don't feel like they truly belong where they are. And so that's part of I think that sense or that feeling of division and separation that's happening in the world. And I apologize because we have a repairman coming into the house. So we're going to go to a commercial break, folks, and let the dogs calm down in the background. But we're going to be right back with more here on New Thought Today in just a moment. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And we're back with more of New Thought Today here on the New Thought Media Network. Before the break, we wandered into the territory that we wanted to kind of start with, which was looking at the future of society. However, in our pregame, in our setup, Reverend LZ and I, we were talking about looking at this through the lens of what's happening with AI. And during the break, it kind of struck me that okay, it is artificial intelligence, However, it is an expression or an extrapolation, if you will, of divine intelligence through the human experience. All right, everything in AI was first conceived or revealed through the mind of the human, and especially the divine truth of life. And so, whatever we want to call it, altered intelligence, perhaps instead of artificial, maybe it's just altered intelligence. It seems to me that barring a complete meltdown of technology, this tool, this resource, this new expression, and again, we know it's not that new. AI has been around for quite a while. It's just there's a real proliferation of tools right now, of new ways to use these technologies. It seems to me that we need to have this part of the conversation, that what are the possibilities for human AI collaboration in the future. Right now, it seems like we're kind of using AI, right? But what happens when AI is intelligent enough to cooperate with what we're doing, or collaborate with us, or intuit what it is that we're trying to accomplish through the Chat GPT and DALL-E and all the. There's every day I turn around, there's another company touting how AI can make me rich and make it so I don't have to do a damn thing, but count the money. So that's another conversation. What are your feelings, Z?
Yes. Well, it's interesting because my cousin went to Vegas a month or so ago and went to the Sphere, the new attraction in Vegas. And there was a robot that greeted him. And the robot came up to him and said, "Hi, hi," and said, I think he said what his name is. He said, "Hi, who are you? Or how are you? What is your name?" or something to that effect. And he gave his name and said, "Oh, hi, I'm so-and-so." And he said, "Where are you from?" "Chicago." "Oh, the Windy City." And it went on, he said, for about 5 minutes or so, having this type of engaging conversation.
Right.
Now, for some people, you might say, "Oh, okay, that's cool." But when you think about it, that robot had no idea what he was going to say, where he was from,
right.
What kind of work he did, but it carried on a real conversation. And we understand that what they're presenting to the public now for AI or for any of this stuff is either only the tip of the iceberg or the only part of the iceberg they're going to let you see in public. So the ideas of this thing already being fully advanced to do some fully to do some really serious things on either side of the spectrum is already there. That's why I believe now we have all these legal debates and all these conversations about how do we. It's almost like, how do we put the genie back in the bottle? And that ain't happening. The genie is out. The genie's not going back in the bottle. So now the question becomes, how do we interact with? How do we begin to live with this new intelligence, if you will, or this new entity in our lives to support and to maybe be a distraction or a detractor from these various aspects of life: medicine, society, politics, health, whatever.
And when you were telling that story, I thought you were going down the road of the robot was going to try to sell him an upgrade. Like, hey, Mr. Sekou, I see you in section 423 and you're kind of in the middle of a row there, but I got a couple of really good down front, and for a couple $100 and show me your ID so I can scan it, we'll move you down front. We'll get you in the VIP section real quick. And that's really where that scenario could go, because they have that. Or I'm sorry, I don't see you on the guest list tonight, Mr. Sekou. you're going to have to find the exit, please. And you're going to have robot bouncers that are the nope, sorry, your name ain't on the list, buddy. Get out.
Yeah. It's an interesting dystopic, and I don't want to go there, but it's an interesting dystopic kind of framework, right? That we are being presented with. And as metaphysicians and new thought philosophers, we have to begin to think in line, I believe, with how do we begin to include and incorporate this type of entity, being, tool, however we want to classify it, into the everyday existence. Because in most cases, we've already begun to rely on it. I mean, there's probably very few people who doesn't talk to Siri or Google or Amazon, the other thing, to ask a question, right? If you're in your car and you're trying to drive and you want directions to the nearest store, you're not going to start, well, hopefully you don't start trying to reach over there and punch. You're going to hit one button and say, closest Amazon or closest Wendy's or McDonald's or whatever the thing is you're trying to find. And it's going to bring it up.
Yep.
We have to begin to start thinking in that way.
Yep. And what hits me is now is the time to create more content, because these AI models, they're living, they eat, breathe, sleep, and recreate content again and again and again and again and again. And so I think I've said this before, but I think I'm going to keep saying it until it happens. What happens if we flood these AI models with positivity, with new thought philosophy, with an outlook towards being a beneficial presence on the planet, having a vision, doing good in the world, and we flood the models with more and more content? It's not just, so yeah, we got to live it, but now we got to document what we're living, so that the AI models are feeding on more of our stuff rather than the death, doom, destruction, and such that's coming out of other media models and coming out of other media outlets and coming out of other, and is, well, prolific, because as we said earlier, right? If it bleeds, it leads. If it's a crisis, it's going to sell. And we've got to make positivity, we've got to make new thought more valuable in the keyword space, in the content space, so the AI models pick up on that. So every time you talk to Siri, ask Siri what Dr. Ernest Holmes would think about this. Siri, what would Dr. Ernest Holmes think about the migrant experience of today? Hey, Siri, what would the new thought philosophy say about the problems with healthcare in America today? Siri, what would the new thought philosophy say about this? Is all coming in the moment, dude. We don't.
Yeah. No. That's I love the perspective. I love the perspective because it does. I mean, you'd have to, even if you don't develop content, if you put the prompt in, it has to go and try to find something or come back and say, I don't have it. Right. And then that would be a key point to develop it. Right. But I'm going to try that. And present different questions and say, what would Ernest Holmes think? What would Raymond Charles Barker think? What would Martin Luther King say? It'd be interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I think and again, we keep training the model that this would be the norm. The norm would be to ask questions. And you just said it, the word prompt. It all comes back to the prompt, the quality. And many have heard me say this. I say it a lot. The quality of our lives is directly proportional to the quality of our questions. So let's change the last word to prompt. The quality of our lives is directly proportional to the quality of our prompts, of what we are asking of the universal intelligence, and then what that leads us to in
there is in I'm sorry. I was thinking about. I was just looking in. We had talked earlier about the 4 pivots by Dr. Sean Ginwright, and in the chapter 4, where he talks about belonging, excuse me. He starts out with this question. He says the wrong first question is, what do we need to do? The right first question is, what do we need to become?
Yes. I want to give a quick shout out to Linda. It's good to see you, Linda. Yeah. What would Edgar Casey say? What would Louise Hay say? What would Horatio Dresser say? What would Thomas Troward say? How would so-and-so, how would the Beatles respond to this? How would, and that's our point here. How do we get into those really good questions that aren't, how does this work for me? But I think, and what I remember from reading the 4 pivots, it's more, how does this work for we? How does this work in a way that supports everyone, not just me and mine and my bank account?
Right. And that goes back to the whole idea where we were on the spiral. This is a universe. It is one thing. Everything affects and like that eclipse yesterday affected everything. And they were doing studies yesterday to determine how the animals behave when the eclipse. Did it have an effect on the planet? Because the scientists, the possibility thinkers, in a lot of ways, understand the connectedness of it all. And they want to, these things don't happen. Like the next one that happens in the United States is 20 years from now, 44.
Yep.
So they won't get a chance to understand or grab data to research this for another 20 years. When we can start living life that way and start looking at ways to resolve problems and create value and people belonging, because we don't know when the next opportunity is going to come, and we got to do this right now like our life depended on it, hint, hint, then we'll get busy with doing this stuff.
I'm reminded of the phrase, we're all just walking each other home.
Yeah,
we're all just bringing ourselves and each other to a greater understanding of the oneness, of the absolute oneness that we are. And I think I shared with you, Z, my eldest has been accepted to a research project, but part of what they're doing is it's such big data that what he was sharing with me is people and he can see that it appears the big data is alive, because the data will move its way to something and move back. And if you really look at it, and this is much like the microbes and microscopic, COVID, all the diseases we have are nothing more than a whole ton of microbes working together. We got it. I think we got a better opportunity than the microbes. And I think we can utilize the greater than us in the data to activate and actualize and actually live in a society where belonging is the norm.
Yeah.
And no one feels, you may not belong over here, but there is a place where you do belong. And let's help you find the place where you belong, not try to make you change something so that you belong here.
Right. And that's interesting, right? Because as we talk about the 4 pivots, when you start looking at big data, there's 2 things that they talk about constantly. They talk about a cube
Mhm.
and they're talking about pivots. How do I get this data that is in cube form, that is multidimensional, that is geometric? And then once I get it there, because it's forming itself in that way anyway, what are the pivots? Or how do I pivot to pull this piece of data out more succinctly across barriers or across environments and vice versa, and boom, boom, boom. So again, to me, it gets back to this whole idea of possibility thinking. I got all this information. What are the different possibilities? What are the combinations of creating exactly what you said, a connectedness between all this, what seems to be disparate points, to create an integrated vision of a whole thing that is geometric, that can take many shapes and forms?
I envision humanity, human life, actually operating in that space of the hive mind, where across the planet, there isn't a question of right or wrong, good or bad. There is what is, and what is working towards a world that works for all, towards a and so that's that phrase that. And philosophically, we can argue that the world is already working for everyone on the planet according to their own thoughts. What you do may not work for me,
Right.
but it is working for you. And in there is the resistance, and there is the chaos, and there is the push and the shove that makes it appear differently, makes it hard to see. Yes.
And that only lasts as long, or it lasts until I realize the interrelatedness between me and you.
Right. And when we come to see,
then it will begin to shift.
Yes. When we finally come to see the oneness of it all, I recognize that what I'm doing to you is what I'm doing to me. It's the old I'm rubber and you're glue. What you do, right? What you say bounces off of me and sticks to you. There's some deep wisdom in the way kids understand life, right? And or how we used to teach our kids to understand life. And we come to that place of recognizing that deeply we are one. And there's nothing that can really change that. Even if we try, we can't change that. Even if we go out there and work our hardest to pry apart society and to make somebody wrong and to vilify somebody else, when it comes right down to it, at the end of the day, we're still one.
Yeah. That whole idea of, the body is a microcosm of the macrocosm of the universe. You just start looking at how you treat your body and what the results is. You might be eating cake every day, all day, and it tastes good to the taste buds and it feels good to the indoor, but your insulin level, or your whatever parts that get affected by overly sugar and overly carbs, and will start telling on you. And it will say, you may not think I'm interrelated and integrated with you, but you got to tone that down. Or in some cases, you have to stop that altogether, because you've taken something that would have been great in small measure. You've overdone it. Now it's stretched out of proportion and it can't go back in.
Yep.
But you don't get that if you don't understand the interrelatedness of things.
Yep. Exactly. I don't know why, but I just flashed back to a scene in the movie from Animal House. And in that scene, they're at a college, and the college professor is has obviously been hanging out partying with some of the students. And the one student is like, so what you're saying is that if every cell of my fingernail could be a planet in another universe, then that means that our planet could be a cell in the fingernail of some giant being in some other universe. And they've obviously been partaking in some marijuana at this point in the movie. And the professor's like, exactly. Right. And now, when I was younger, when I was a teenager, when I did, yeah, that sounded like some far off crazy hippie shit, and and that was how they wrote it for the movie. But the longer I live, the more I realize, well, that was a pretty deep truth that they were laying on us in the middle of this amazing, in this, crazy party animal type of movie. They were laying some deep truth in the middle of that thing. If you knew what you were listening for, if you had the ears to hear, if you had the eyes to see. And that to me is what excites me the most right now about the future, if you will, for New Thought, or what's happening in New Thought today. I think there are more and more people that are waking up to these deep philosophical and universal truths that make us go, wow, man, that's deep. And more people are waking up. They have the eyes to see, they have the ears to hear this universal message that we can use to change the course of our future, to move into a more harmonious living experience. Because we do have the power to destroy this planet. We do have the power to activate an apocalyptic future. I'm going to stick on this side that says I'd rather have the rainbows and butterflies and the good stuff than and the collaboration with AI rather than a competition with AI.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, at the heart of Ernest Holmes' teachings, there's the simple phrase, change your thinking, change your life.
Mm-hmm.
And someone changed their thinking and came up with the AI, and it has immense potential to change our lives. But it has to be, I believe, looked at as an intricate part of the whole. It can't be something that's set off to the side. And we have to, in some ways, figure out how to embrace it, because it's not going away. It's only going to proliferate. I mean, you think about the evolution of the first cell phone, that big old brick, to what you carry in your hands now. In what? That was in the 80s, so 40 something years. Depends on when you count.
All right, folks, that's about that's as half the time it's going to take us to get to the next eclipse. And before we do that, we do need to say thank you to our sponsors and our donors. However, don't go away. We're going to come right back with our final thoughts here on New Thought Today. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah,
and the Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Yes. Thank you to all of our organizational sponsors and individual donors. It is thanks to you that we're able to share this message of new thought across the planet again and again and again. So we appreciate your support. All right, Z, we're at that point. Final thoughts?
Well, this for me, this has been kind of enlightening. And my final thought would be, if you have not taken any side trips into the philosophy of spiral dynamics and the connectedness of all things, I would say that would be a good little junket to go on. And while you're in that vein, look at some nature programs about the connectedness of all things, because we're going to need it more and more. And we're going to need a new thought perspective, a philosophical, metaphysical, practice-based understanding of how to engage this stuff, or else it's going to be so alien and so foreign to us that it will not serve us as best it can.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yes. Yeah. As you were sharing, I was struck. I'm reading a book called Weird Church right now, and it's very heavily a Christian book. And it talks about how to save the Christian church, but they're teaching spiral dynamics, and they're looking at that topic from the lens through a spiral dynamics lens of where we are on the spiral, both individually, organizationally, and what the future holds as we move into the higher realms of the spiral, if you will. So I'm going to echo what Z says. If all of what we just said is totally foreign to you, then just do a quick search on the internet and do for spiral dynamics. You'll find a wealth of information. Please keep looking into what we're doing here on New Thought today. I also really enjoyed today's conversation because while we touched on some of what we prepared for, Spirit took us into some other dimensions and some other realms where I know there are things I needed to hear and things that caused me give me pause for a deeper thought around this philosophy of new thought. So thanks for being a part of it, Z. Yeah,
I always walk away a different person than I came in here, because we go into realms of possibilities and consciousness that without this interaction would take a little bit longer to reveal themselves.
There we go. Amen to that. Right on. All right, folks, we're out of here for now. We'll be back again next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time for the next episode of New Thought Today. Until then, we want to wish you peace and richest blessings. Bye now.